Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the community of independent thinkers. The elites in Washington are currently throwing a victory party on television. Most of the newspapers you read this morning are busy painting a glowing illusion of American power and its supposed greatness. They tell you that the massive military campaign in the Middle East is perfectly on track, that the enemy has been decapitated, and that their military has been crushed into dust. They boast that the joint United States and Israeli alliance has completely wiped out Iran's missile arsenal, destroyed their air defenses, and crippled their navy. You are told that the brutal theocratic leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is dead. You hear the American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stand at the podium and boldly declare that American air dominance is absolute, that never before has a modern capable military been destroyed and rendered combat ineffective so quickly. They call it a historic victory. But let us brush aside the lies of the mainstream media to look at the naked truth. What you are witnessing is absolutely not a glorious victory. This is not peacemaking. This is the beginning of a strategic suicide. These are ruthless structural forces at play, a tragedy machine slowly grinding down the core national interests of the United States. 2 weeks have passed since President Trump made the choice to ignite the biggest war in the Middle East in nearly a quarter century. The Western elites, afflicted with their familiar hubris, truly believed that conventional firepower could solve any complex geopolitical puzzle. The American president even told the Iranian people on the very morning of the opening attack that when the American bombs finish clearing the way, they should simply rise up and take over their government. That is a classic delusion of the liberal hawks and neoconservatives. We were lulled by this exact same siren song in Iraq in 2003. We completely destroyed Libya and turned it into a slave market, and we threw Syria into a sea of fire. Just as we ignored William Burns' desperate warnings at the Bucharest summit in April 2008, leading Ukraine down the primrose path to suicide and backing Russia into a corner to create a catastrophic meat grinder in Eastern Europe, today we are repeating that exact fatal naivete in the Persian Gulf. We think that merely removing a dictator means the population will welcome us with roses. It is pure naivete. The reality on the streets of Tehran right now is not a sweeping democratic uprising, but angry mobs gathering in major squares, united by a blazing nationalistic hatred fueled by American airstrikes. This hatred reached a boiling point after the tragedy of an American Tomahawk cruise missile striking a school outside a military base, leaving hundreds of lives shattered, the vast majority of them children. We are not liberating anyone. We are simply consolidating the grip of a theocratic machine now commanded by the Ayatollah's injured son, a machine hungry for revenge and determined to deploy every asymmetrical lever they possess. President Trump himself now bitterly admits that the loyalist militias tied to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps will systematically slaughter anyone who dares to stand up in protest. Let us talk about material power and the actual mechanics of asymmetrical warfare. In this anarchic international system, power is not determined by hollow declarations of victory in the press. Power is measured by the physical ability to strangle your opponent's economy. Washington smugly reports that Iran is firing 90% fewer missiles and 95% fewer one-way attack drones than at the start of the war. But the destruction of traditional military forces does not eliminate a desperate nation's capacity to sow global chaos. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a normal body of water. This is the economic jugular of all humanity. Iran does not need a massive blue water navy with aircraft carrier strike groups to blockade this choke point. The mechanism here is remarkably simple and ruthless. It only takes a single Iranian soldier zipping across the narrow neck of the strait in a speedboat, firing a mobile missile, or planting a limpet mine on the hull of a slow-moving supertanker. The inevitable result of this mechanism is complete logistical paralysis. Even though the American Defense Secretary claims this threat to shipping traffic is nothing to worry about, the reality is that the vital waterway has been locked down, choking off a massive chunk of global trade. At least 16 oil tankers and commercial vessels have already been attacked directly in the Persian Gulf. No matter how much the American president takes to social media to urge ship owners to show some guts, no shipping conglomerate is foolish enough to offer their multi-hundred-million-dollar assets as target practice. Maritime insurance premiums are skyrocketing, driving oil prices up to around $100 a barrel. The United States, to quench its thirst for energy and alleviate price hikes, has even had to swallow its pride and suspend sanctions against some Russian oil sales. Our enemies understand the vulnerabilities of the Western political structure perfectly. They know that soaring energy bills and plunging stock markets constitute an internal political pressure capable of suffocating any American president. Our economy is bleeding to death while we are busy celebrating our total air dominance. The shadow of retaliation does not stop at the Gulf. The powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps paramilitary force and their vast militia networks remain firmly in place. They have immediately activated a highly talented cyber warfare network, aiming straight at critical targets in the United States and Israel. They completely took down the systems of a massive medical equipment corporation in Michigan, with a hacker group claiming responsibility as direct retaliation for the deadly school strike. More terrifyingly, the specter of terrorism has crept into the United States itself, with a man opening fire at a university in Virginia and another ramming a vehicle into a synagogue in Michigan, carrying the unmistakable hallmark of martyrdom inspired by the conflict. The atmosphere of absolute security that Americans have always believed in is shattering. 13 American soldiers have already perished in action. Over 2,100 lives have been taken since the first shots rang out. This power vacuum and this rising body count represent the naked material price that soldiers on the ground must pay for the arrogant decisions made in the air-conditioned rooms of the political elite. Now let us dissect the deadly alliance trap that is currently dragging America's grand strategy into the mud. In the theory of offensive realism, great powers must always maintain absolute strategic autonomy. They must never allow minor allies to dictate their foreign policy or drag them into broader regional conflagrations. But what we are seeing is the United States being led by the nose by Israel. Both President Trump and the American military command desperately warned the Israelis not to strike the massive oil tanks outside Iran's capital, fearing a retaliatory spiral targeting the entire region's energy infrastructure. Yet, the Israeli Prime Minister completely ignored that advice, sending forces to bomb the oil depots with a delusional belief that the sight of black smoke blanketing Tehran would somehow create internal chaos and spark a regime-toppling riot. What was the inevitable consequence? Iran immediately launched swarms of drones to devastate oil refining and storage facilities in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, forcing a massive export terminal at Fujairah to halt all oil loading operations. It does not stop there. Israel continues to open a second front in Lebanon to target Hezbollah, despite the Trump administration's view that these strikes are taking resources and attention away from the main target and stretching American commitments to a perilous breaking point. When you tie your national survival and your military apparatus to the short-term political survival calculus of a foreign leader, you are single-handedly stripping away your own great power status. The core voters of the domestic political base, those who are utterly exhausted by foreign interventions, are standing on the precipice of a shattered trust as they watch American casualties mount for endless wars. The most ruthless and intractable aspect of this entire crisis lies deep underground in the fortified tunnels of Isfahan. Iran still holds about 970 pounds of uranium enriched to 60%, just a razor-thin margin away from weapons-grade capability. We have systematically destroyed their conventional forces, backing a proud nation into a corner. And the logic of fear is an iron law. When a nation faces an existential threat, stripped of all conventional defensive capabilities, they will act exactly like a cornered beast. They will reach for the ultimate deterrent weapon. The bleeding, desperate leadership apparatus of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps now has a stronger survival incentive than at any point in history to keep that nuclear fuel and weaponize it as leverage to force the United States to back off. The American Secretary of State has already started hinting at the necessity of a ground operation to retrieve this highly toxic material from deep underground storage. Imagine the sheer insanity of that scenario. Sending special operations forces into tunnel systems with bombed-out, collapsed entrances, executing a delicate extraction mission lasting weeks to move gas canisters. There is absolutely no room for error. If those canisters are pierced, the result is highly toxic radiation, and if they are kept too close together, you risk triggering a critical nuclear chain reaction. The United States has had to hastily cut short the deployment of 2,500 Marines from the Indo-Pacific, throwing them back into the Middle Eastern cauldron to supplement the 50,000 troops already bogged down there. If we decide to launch an amphibious assault to seize Karg Island and Bapnget, their oil exports, we will have to maintain a massive occupying force enduring relentless ambushes from remnants of the Guards Corps operating from the shore. This is exactly the eternal bleeding quagmire that the American political base warned against and that President Trump himself swore he would never repeat. And this brings us to the final verdict, the greatest strategic tragedy of our era. While America is bleeding its military resources and economic vitality dry in the deadly waters of the Middle East, who is sitting back reaping the benefits? It is our sole peer competitor. China is watching every single development with a chilling silence. According to the true principles of grand strategy, all of Washington's naval capacity and attention should be pivoting to Asia to contain Beijing's massive expansion. Instead, hubris has led America to author an unprecedented geopolitical humiliation. The American president had to publicly appeal on social media, begging China, France, Japan, South Korea, and Britain to send naval forces to the Middle East to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. We are pleading with our greatest geopolitical rival to provide backup and resources to protect global maritime arteries in a war we unilaterally plunged into without bothering to consult those very allies. China, a customer devouring over 1.4 million barrels of Iranian oil every single day, now holds all the strategic leverage. As the long-awaited summit in Beijing approaches, the American president will walk into the negotiating room not as a global hegemon dictating terms, but as a man sinking in a quagmire, severely constrained by President Xi Jinping's power to manipulate critical minerals and energy supplies. America faces two incredibly stark choices. We can stubbornly sink deeper into a meaningless war of occupation that drains all our core resources and puts more American lives at risk. Or we can try to extract ourselves and flee, leaving behind a pile of ashes with a vengeful Iranian state still in possession of its nuclear fuel. We chose to ignore the ruthless laws of material power to chase delusional ideals. The truth they do not want you to know is that America is personally handing the keys to global hegemony directly to its greatest adversary. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never stop questioning the sugar-coated lies of the mainstream media. Please subscribe to the channel and continue to stand with this community of intellectual resistance. We are going to need each other in the remarkably bleak times ahead. The naked truth is still out there. I will see you next time.